Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Table of Geeks, where all of us sit here and talk on Discord and talk about stuff that interests us. And today we're going to be talking about mythological creatures because they're cool and stuff. And yeah, I'm going to move it along to Jose and Emma. Take it away.
I'm actually in class right now in college. I'm studying to become an anthropologist, which is, for those of you that don't know, the study of humans. I think that humans are the cutest creatures. I think they're my favorite animal by far. And part of the reason for that is because of the tales that we tell ourselves and these creatures and these myths and these stereotypes and like archetypes that have followed us for millennia. I think that it's absolutely precious and adorable, so I'm very excited to talk about mythological creatures today.
And hello, everybody. I'm also very excited. I love learning about different cultures, their myths, the creatures they believed in or still believe in some cases. And I love how those legends can influence media today, comic books, video games, even movies. They will take creatures of myth, twist them around sometimes, and put them in their stories. And I absolutely love that.
And with me, I'm a giant monster nerd because I always love monsters. I'm literally wearing a Cthulhu hoodie because I love H.P. Lovecraft. I have such a passion for monsters, and especially my personal favorite, which is also happens to be Jose's favorite monster, which we'll get into later. Starting off, though, what do you guys want to talk about with cryptids, monsters? What are we doing?
I actually had something I wanted to share with you guys first. So my papa, the one I was telling you guys about before the podcast started, he was huge into folklore, and he's from this area of on the coast of Mississippi, in this area called Biloxi, and there is a river here called the Pascagoula River. Now, both the city of Biloxi and the Pascagoula River take their names from Native American tribes that used to live here. There's a plethora of like folklore about these two tribes, but the one in particular I wanted to tell you guys about because it's just sick is one that he told me one time when we were passing over the Pascagoula River. So a really long time ago, I want to say 16th, 17th century, we the white people at this point had already made their way into the Louisiana Purchase, that type area. So we did already know about the Native American tribes. We had some contact with them, or I say we, the Europeans. The Pascagoula tribe ended up mysteriously vanishing, essentially overnight from what the settlers knew.
I've heard of
And
this.
yes,
Yeah,
so the myth goes that there was the leader of the Pascagoula tribe was in love with basically a princess of the Biloxi tribe, and they wanted to be together. And there are other fairy tales or local legends about that as well. Like there's a super cool tree with like a circle in one of the branches that's just grown in naturally. But that's not the point. Point is, they wanted to be together, and the Biloxi tribe was not okay with that at all. So they decided they were going to go to war with the Pascagoula people. They were going to kill them and enslave them. The Pascagoula were hopelessly outnumbered. They had no chance. And the Pascagoula River is also known as the Singing River because there's frequently, I mean, there's even like a governor of, I want to say Louisiana, who came to the Pascagoula River at one point and wrote down in one of his letters that he could hear this eerie singing, almost like a disembodied voice coming from the river. And so the legend goes that faced with utter annihilation, the Pascagoula River stood on the banks of, or the Pascagoula people stood on the banks of the Pascagoula River, held hands, and followed this mysterious singing voice into the river, and very peacefully chose to drown themselves than to face annihilation. Um, I just think that's a really cool legend, partly because it's kind of mermaid-esque, and I'm a big mermaid siren person.
if you didn't hear from the last episode,
Same.
we talked about it during the D&D discussion and how I killed her mermaid character because mermaids can't breathe oxygen, Emma.
Like there have people,
Can't they,
okay?
though?
No, they can't because they're underwater creatures. They cannot survive on land because they don't have legs. They have fish
I mean,
floppy
they can
things.
breathe out of the water, but if they don't go into water, they will dry out, but they can breathe.
There we go.
It
That's what just
That's
dried
depends.
you out.
facts.
It depends on what type of mermaid or siren we're talking about. If we're talking about the Celtic version of the Selkie, that is a
I love the
woman
Selkie.
who, oh, they're so
Is that a
cool.
seal?
No,
Yes, so Selkies are seals. They wear seal skin, and then they can choose to come a land or come ashore, and then strip themselves of their seal skins. They have to hide them away, and then they can just take the form of a beautiful woman and live on land for as long as they want to.
Mhm.
Eventually, though, it is implied that they do have to return to the sea.
Now, just because I absolutely, and I'm excited that somebody else knows about these, then because normally I mention them and people are like, "What?" Can you tell the people what happens if someone finds their seal skin?
They hide it. There's a huge legend about a Selkie woman where a man was walking along the shore and he saw a seal come ashore, strip its seal skin, turn into a beautiful woman, and watched her hide her seal skin. He then went and took it and hid it away. And then he found this woman, fell in love with her, married her. They had multiple children. And years later, she ended up finding her seal skin. And without a moment's hesitation, she slipped back into it and went back out to the sea. Never saw her again.
Serves him right. I mean, I feel bad for the kids, but serves him
Yeah.
right.
where did
Yeah.
mommy go? Back into the ocean, little Timmy. I'm
Back to the
sorry.
ocean.
So,
Well,
Jose,
I love those stories, and I love how different versions of different creatures can be, depending on what country you're in. Like there's like a few different countries that have legends about a phoenix-like creature. In China they have it, Japan, Greece, they all had different versions of the phoenix. I've always been fascinated by reading about a creature and then looking around different cultures, different countries, and seeing how they interpreted it. Another creature that I know you two are very, very, very fond of that exists in multiple cultures is the dragon.
yep.
There are different, like in China and Japan, they have like wingless dragons that look more like snakes. They have, in European folklore, you have the dragon with the wings and the horns and the breathing of fire. Um, it's always amazing to me how
Even the
different they are. And then
Mayans
someone,
had
yes,
depictions of dragons.
Yep. They had
hmm
Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent.
Yep.
The Christianization of dragons is very interesting to me because so like in the North American folklore, you have like we were saying, Quetzalcoatl, who was a deity and one of the most well known from what we have. And then in the Eastern dragon, you have the wingless, um, legless, just like worm looking things that are super cool, but they're also incredibly wise and they're wonderfully good omens. Then, like I was saying about the Christianization of dragons in Europe, you have this serpent who is evil and greedy and hungry for power and bloodthirsty and likes to eat people and kill
It's a
people.
demon. They literally turned it into
Yes,
a demon.
yes. Another really cool small little tidbit on demons, quote unquote, is,
hmm,
and this is actually one of my favorite I guess synchronizations or syncretism is the word for it specifically when you're talking about like religions matching up over time and area. But another little fun tidbit is genies or jinn.
mm,
So in Arabic folklore, traditional like put them in a lamp, put them in a bottle, seal them up, that kind of thing. They're malevolent spirits that want to harm you.
Yes.
In the practice of hoodoo and from the New Orleans area, which is a beautiful combination of a lot of Catholicism and then West African spiritualities. There is a practice of if you want to banish a demon from your home, what you do is you take a bottle, you stuff Spanish moss into it, and then you seal it with wax, and then you take that bottle and you throw it into a body of water, which is exactly what in Arabic culture you do with genie lamps. So
Hmm.
technically, the Mississippi River is full of genies.
Well, there you go. We just need to get some scuba diving gear and just go down there and get some genies.
No, don't do
or
that.
not, or not.
Yeah.
We do not
No.
recommend this action.
Yeah, we do not. Leave them alone. It is closed
But
for a reason.
actually, I have
There will
another
be
fun
people who
fact.
would do that.
Fun fact for you, man. Unless I told you this one already, but the podcast doesn't know. Do you know where the word demon originates from?
I do, but tell us.
The word
Mother-in-laws.
the word demon originates from the Greek word, from the translation from the Hebrew Bible to the Greek Bible, as divos, which means a fallen angel in Greek. We changed that because Greek wording, devos, we did not have a translation for English, so we basically copied and pasted it and changed one syllable or one letter to make it demon. There is never once in the Bible, minus King James, if you look at the Hebrew text or the Hebrew text at all, the Greek text at all, the original text of the Bible, there was no mention of demons. It is not until King James with the Greek misunderstanding of demos when they call them demons instead of fallen angels.
I could tear into some King James,
Yes.
but maybe let's not do that.
Yeah,
we
no.
can say that for a different podcast channel. um, but yeah, like I said, I really do love when the myths themselves, like you said, like between the connection with the genies and the demons and those two different cultures. It doesn't matter the distance between the lands. These stories traveled very well because back then, the spoken word was the most powerful thing, and people would talk. There's this one creature that I'm not gonna say I love because that would be creepy. But I was fascinated by the level of belief that these people had in this particular creature. And it actually ties in with demons and jinn or genies, as you mentioned. And it was called Popo Bawa. And Popo Bawa was basically this humanoid male shaped demon with like bat wings and smelled like reeked of sulfur and apparently was a shape changer, and he would attack men when they were sleeping in their own beds. Now, I am not of this culture. I so there might be, just which is common with myths, there might be different versions of the story. This is just the one that I see told more often. But he sodomized. Pardon, trigger warning for anyone that is upset
Trigger
by
warning, trigger warning, trigger warning.
attacks. He attacks these men in a sexual way in their own beds, and they are threatened with repeated attacks and longer attacks. And let's just say this demon, according to the stories, is apparently very well endowed. So it's very painful. And I mention that only because it's in the story. And if the men that get attacked do not go out and tell everyone they know about what happened, he threatens to come back the following night and attack them for longer. The fear that this story, which I would love to know how it started out, but the fear this creature created actually caused men and even the women and children in the village to not sleep in their own beds, to either sleep in their neighbor's home or even in the middle of the village. So such was the fear that this story told. And this character, this demon, was apparently originally a genie that, got its freedom. It got loose. It did not want to follow orders. The person that originally tried to bind it ended up getting killed. And then he just went off into this, murderous, predator spree in this one village. And you hear that, and ironically, the two couples that I heard recently talking about it on their podcast, they live in the New Orleans area, and they talk about a lot of different myths and from different cultures, and they mentioned Popo Bawa, and they told a only slightly different version of the story. So I love the word of mouth and how these stories spread like wildfire sometimes. And it's not just these stories interact with other stories and eventually kind of become one with each other, but also how these myths go into popular media in modern day. Like I said, movies, novels, comic books, video games. They all end up having versions of these characters or these creatures in it. Like, God of War has a lot of like Greek mythology creatures and stuff in it. The Harry Potter series has a lot of different creatures in it. From that they weren't original to the story. They were, taken from folklore and worked around a little bit and then put into these stories. And I always found that fascinating.
So I have a question for you, Jose, and then I'm going to tell my favorite thing. Where
Shoot.
actually for both Jose and Emma, where is the chupacabra originate from?
In my
Uh, oh,
unlearned
Careful.
You go ahead. You go ahead. You go
No,
ahead.
no. You go first, Emma.
Careful.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I could be entirely wrong. I want you to know. I just want to preface. Not 100% positive, but is it from Central America, or is it from the Midwestern United States, or am I totally wrong?
Jose, where's it from?
I've had conversations with my fellow Latinos. I am Puerto Rican. I am from the island of Puerto Rico, and we claim the chupacabra as ours. That the
It
folklore came
originated
from us.
from Puerto Rico. That's verified.
Yes. But other countries, well, and again, this is when I was younger and I was more prideful. I was like, that is not a Mexican story. That is Puerto Rican, But like I just mentioned, it doesn't matter the distance between the lands. Anything, there are things that connect certain lands to each other, whether it be, European explorers coming from one country to the other and taking people with them. And so stories will spread that way. So now there's a reason why we know that, they might tell about the chupacabra in Cuba and Mexico and stuff like that. But Puerto Rico, it is where it originated from.
See, my personal favorite monster that we thought didn't exist until about 10 years ago is
sea monster.
Yes. We always told these folklore stories, and I'm a descendant of a pirate. Like literally through my family tree. Sea creatures. Mainly the giant squid. There's stories about these ships traveling and they'd be attacked by this giant squid. And it could pull entire ships underwater, break it in half. And it was very fearful. It was such a popular myth that like maps of Europe and of the other parts of the world had drawings of these squids in the ocean. And we thought after we went to the technology age, it's like, oh, these things don't exist. They were just myth and rumor. Until 10 years ago, we found a video. They sent deep sea exploration, found the giant squid, and it does indeed exist. The thing is,
well, we thought.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
The thing is, like, we tell these stories about monsters. They might exist. It's just we haven't found them yet.
I mean, I hope some of them do not, because Popobawa exists. But we did have evidence of that before. Like but we never seen a live one. We always seen like dead bodies. And so that actually, I do love that you brought that up, because I'm picturing those old maps with like "Here be dragons" kind of thing on them, and there you go, and you see, the giant squid. And then we found the colossal squid, which is even bigger.
Yep.
So I do love that you brought that up. So one question I want to add. Oh, go ahead.
Mermaids are real. Okay, 97% of the ocean hasn't been explored yet. You cannot prove to me that mermaids are real.
Mermaids are real. Cthulhu's real. I'm leaving it at that. He's in this Mariana's Trench. That's all I have to say.
I don't care if they're ugly, man. I don't care if they have these massive eyes to be able to see.
Got the two mermaids. Listen, they're just deep ones that worship Cthulhu. Okay.
I'm down for that. I am down.
I mean, I don't care who they worship as long as they're real and they don't have like lanternfish eyes. But yeah, I mean, I would, I mean, it would be, I don't know if I would say cool, because I have seen a couple B movies, like B horror movies, where the bad guy was indeed a mermaid, and they weren't that great, but they made the mermaid look really hideous, and it's because, think about it, like, they can't all look like Ariel from The Little Mermaid. You know what I mean? They would have to have some kind of adaptation to help them survive. And I wish I remember this person. It was on DeviantArt, and they drew a whole series of mermaids and how they would look like depending on where they might live. If they live in more like Arctic cold waters, if they live in tropical waters, deep sea waters. And one, they were like they live in the open sea, and they had to have this adaptation where on top of them, kind of like whales and sharks and stuff. On the top, they were darker, but on the bottom, they had like white skin, because that way, if someone looks up from the water and towards the surface, they'll see the light, and they won't see them because they're white on the bottom. So it was really cool how they, the artist's depiction of mermaids has evolved.
Is it something like, if I can get my thing to focus, something like that?
That would for those of you who can't see, he's holding some kind of like creature of the Blue Lagoon looking mermaid, and that is horrifying.
That is the deep one from H.P. Lovecraft.
Praise Dagon.
Praise Dagon.
Thinka. But yeah, so a question I want to ask you guys: what is a just one? Let's try to keep it to one. What is a mythological creature that you absolutely love that has been depicted in maybe more modern ways, whether it be comic books, novels, movies, or so on, in a very horrible way? Coots, I know which one you're automatically thinking
I'm
of. We
not
share
going.
this one.
I'm not going to pick this one. I'm going to wait for you. That way we can both share it. I'm going to think of
Okay.
another one.
All
So
right.
I'm going to go first.
Now I'm scared what I'm gonna say is what y'all
Don't
want to
don't.
say.
I
It,
know you're not going to say what we're going to say. I know it.
okay.
Okay.
Even if it is, we'll forgive you.
No, he won't.
Um, question. Probably, I'm gonna go with my basic witch answer and say probably werewolves, cause
Look at that. We were wrong. C did choose our favorite monster.
yeah. See, I knew that was gonna happen. Dang it.
No, it's fine.
No,
We'd
it's
all just
okay.
talk
It's
about
okay.
werewolves.
Because if all three of us are on the same page,
Mhm.
we'll save that for later on
Yeah.
in the podcast, because we do want to talk about werewolves, because we have a very big love for lycanthropes.
My other
But if
hoodie
I
is a werewolf. This for instance, because I'm wearing my Cthulhu
my
one. I
other,
have a werewolf one. It's also from the Vampire Freaks. So I love werewolves.
I thought you were saying that your hoodie is actually a werewolf.
Oh
Like,
no! I wish.
He's like a Selkie, but for werewolves. He just
Exactly.
slipped into his werewolf skin.
that I have seen that depict. I'm not in like video games, but like someone wrote a story where that's how they do it. Like they just remove their wolf
Yeah.
skin. Um, but anyway, the two that I love, and one of them I hesitate to call a myth because of it is based off of certain belief systems that people do have to this day, and that is witches. So I'm not calling those a myth because I do believe
I
in
hate to tell you, but you got one in the channel with you, so
same,
Yeah, both
same,
of you.
Hey!
Both of you.
yeah,
We're mythological creatures. This podcast is all about us.
I
yeah.
was surrounded by
But also,
cryptids. Ah!
but like the way that witches are depicted
Yeah.
can vary greatly depending on the media that you are watching or reading. But the big one I want to talk about is vampires. Because while I told Coots yesterday before recording our D&D podcast episode, I love I love vampires because I love their movies. There's a lot of good vampire movies, but I love werewolves more. But I don't say that werewolves are my favorite when it comes to media because unfortunately all the werewolf movies that we have pretty much suck.
Yeah.
But vampires have had more luck. We had TV shows like, The Vampire Diaries,
True
True
Blood.
Blood, and stuff like that.
Being Human.
Being Human, yes, both the American and British versions of those. But vampires, I love how they kind of like changed a little bit. Like when you look at history, Emma, I don't know if you're familiar because you study this kind of stuff. Um, but they were not the pretty people that you see with fangs nowadays. They were corpses, and depending on their level of decay, they would like look like just a regular dead person, or they would look like rotted flesh, almost skeletal beings that fed on the blood of the living.
Yep.
And eventually, over time, because stories evolve as you tell them. It's kind of like when you play that game where like I'll whisper something in Coot's ear and he has to whisper that same thing
Telephone.
into Emma's and so on. Telephone, yeah, and the story will change over time. It's kind of like that, and when you're doing that for centuries, the stories tend to change a lot. And then we have Dracula that was written, and some stories before that too, where they become more human looking, and they really only when they're trying to feed do they look more demonic, for lack of a better term. And I love that evolution of the creatures, but I kind of hate how they're depicted in media sometimes. Like
Twilight.
you know what? Thank you for saying that because I was afraid I was gonna get canceled.
I don't care.
Twilight, like I'm sorry, those were not vampires.
There also weren't werewolves.
And yeah, and and I can say this because I am myself a certified gay. Um, those were not vampires. Those were glittery, blood-sucking fairies. I'm sorry.
I'm
If
quoting that
you
term.
the what I could say this because I'm gay, or the glittering blood-sucking fairies, because both were pretty good. If you go back farther in legend, before really the European Europeanization of the myth of the
Mm-hmm.
vampire. They actually weren't undead at all originally. In Greece, you had and I'm gonna butcher this, the Lamia,
Lamaya.
Lamia. Yeah, and they're effectively like monsters. And and then in Romania, I'm gonna butcher this. I
I know
apologize.
what this one's
They
called. Hang
had
on.
the Strogoi, Strogoi.
Strogov. Oh, the
That
Strogi.
one,
Strogi.
Strogi. They again were
We're
just
both
evil
historians, by the way, if
spirits.
you can't tell.
They were evil spirits that sucked your blood.
Yep.
And then as the tale progressed, they turned into undead that needed your uh your blood to live. Which is just another really cool addition.
And a thing
And there
too,
was actually okay.
the thing too about like vampires, which I think is really cool, which Emma, you can attest to this. In the medieval age, in places like Europe, when this story had spread around, a lot of people were concerned about vampires, like actually being real. Where they would dig up bodies that they suspected being vampires. And due to bloating and decay, there'd be blood in their mouths from the bloating and rotting of their intestines. They would have longer fingernails, the hair would have grown. And so there was formed things like the pennies over the eyes. That was to ward off vampires. Putting a heavy stone on top of a grave that became from vampires. A lot of stuff we do now, which we think is normal, came from the vampire myth where people were scared in Europe.
There are, which I've learned this through a lot of like just research on my own. There are a lot of things that we do or say in our modern culture that have really been stripped of their mythological origins. So, for example, Christmas just passed. Bringing a Christmas tree into your home. That was originally a European pagan tradition for
Yes.
bringing in the spirit of the forest and appeasing a tree spirit to help stave off the thinning of the veil and to help keep away all those evil spirits through the darkest of the nights and the years. Hanging garlands were
Decorating
protective
the tree
ward.
was also a Norse thing. It was in a
Yep.
Satru belief of celebrating the tree. And Yule, for instance, the Yule log, it was called Yule. The gifting of presents on Christmas Day was part of Yule. And what Catholicism did, and they took over places like Europe that had paganism, they adopted all of these pagan traditions into that culture of Catholicism in order to convert the paganistic cultures to that. This is where we get a lot of our modern ideals of different things, like Satan, for instance. You talk about Satan, you always think like the red horn, fur legs, pitchfork, goat-looking guy.
Barb's tail.
He's never depicted like that in the Bible. That what happened was people in the Catholicism went, "Oh, look at these pagans worshiping Baphomet," and they took that and they combined with all these other paganistic ideas, making the devil into what we see and appear now. When actually, realistically, he's beautiful. According to the Bible, he's a beautiful person.
I mean, he was an angel.
He
Which
was the most beautiful angel.
Don't get me started on what they really look like. But
terrifying as shit.
I mean, yeah, look at Lucifer in the TV show Lucifer, and Lucifer in the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which is my personal favorite because he's just yummy. But but yeah, vampires and I love how the whole blood sucking thing is not just found in them. Like there's even an Egyptian goddess, and I looked up her name so I can probably not butcher it, but I'm probably still gonna butcher it. But I think it's pronounced Sekhmet.
Sekhmet.
Yeah. And she would be the wrath of the god. I believe the god Ra, and she would be like the personification of his wrath, and she would go off and do these things. And then in one story, she eventually. I find it funny because
I know you're giggling at Emma. Sorry, go ahead, Jose.
She left Egypt because angry, and to lure her back, and to take her back to where she's supposed to be, they dyed the Nile River. At least I think it was the Nile River. Red.
It was
to make it, and they made it alcoholic, and they made it look red because she drinks blood. She was a bloodsucker. She was like, some people online will even call her like one of the first vampires. And they tricked her to make her think that was blood, but it wasn't. And she got so drunk and passed out, and they were able to bring her back to where she's supposed to be. And I thought that was a very funny thing that they kind of like tricked her into getting drunk and passing out by making her think she was drinking blood. But I love how. What?
Another really cool story about Sekhmet specifically is so she is, as the Egyptian anthropomorphic gods are human and then partly animal as
Hmm.
well. She is a
The
lion
very
goddess.
first furries.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
She's a lion, and her wrath was so great and so they were so unable to tame her. They ended up taking part of her essence to create a new god. And this goddess was named Bastet, who is a cat. And so I love that they took this fierce lion and they essentially turned part of her into a little house cat. Um,
I've got the name of the Egyptian god. There's also an Egyptian god that's like 3 feet high. He's just an old fat guy. I forget what his name is, but there's the little Egyptian god with an old fat guy. I think he's like the goddess of like I think he's the god of fertility, and he's just a short fat dude. There's just the god of fertility. Just hey, you want to have sex? Like that's basically what I think of when I see him. I just can't remember his name. It's driving me insane. I have to look that up real quick.
So please do, because now I'm curious because I've never heard of that. But so yeah, so the way vampires are depicted in certain media, like it's kind of gone down. Like they're more before they were like these evil, terrifying things, and now they kind of devolved into these brooding, like teenage angst kind of thing. Like Vampire Diaries was very like Stefan from Vampire Diaries was very much that. Um, what was it? What was the guy from Twilight again? Edward.
yes.
Yep.
Okay. Edward was very much that. It's so and then, for little kids I understand. Like my son, bless his heart, he loves the Hotel Transylvania movies. And that has been his only exposure to vampires. So he's like blah 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 blah. And he doesn't know the scary version, which I'm gonna try to keep that like that for a while. But the kids' movies, I'm not counting that because they're for kids. But these are meant for young adults and up, and like they're not the evil monsters that I grew up reading about that struck fear in my heart that made me want to buy garlic and whatnot. So I kind of don't like how they're being depicted now. But did you guys think of any creatures that you love that you don't like the way they're depicted, other than werewolves?
Before I get to that, if you look in general chat, I can't show it on the webcam because it's not acceptable for YouTube standards. But that is the Egyptian god of fertility.
Let me.
It's in general
Oh,
chat.
wait, hello.
Yeah, he has a third leg, don't he?
Yeah,
You do. Do be having that third
he
leg.
do, which is not uncommon with certain gods and creatures. Like I said, Popobawa, and then Propiopus, I think is pronounced in Greek mythology. He had one too. So
There's also just traditional Zeus
excuse me.
as well. Like the whole reason that Zeus and Poseidon, not so much Hades, but that's another story entirely, but Zeus and Poseidon were very frequently with women or men, and a
Whether
lot
they
of the
liked it
times
or
it
not.
was, yeah, whether they liked it or not, it was seen as a symbol of their divinity, of their power, their manliness.
There was a
Um,
whole bunch of demigods that they made that like we don't talk about.
And and can I piggyback off that?
yeah,
'Cause this involves a mythical creature, um, that I also don't like how she was depicted in media, because it wasn't until I want to say 2017, and I've been reading about Greek mythology since I was in 5th grade. But in 2016, I finally heard the full story of Medusa. And growing up, Poseidon was always my favorite god. And after hearing this story, I'm like, I'm gonna have to reevaluate some things. But you never hear her end of the story and how she became who she was. They always say she was three of the Gorgon, or how you pronounce it, sisters, and you're led to believe that she was always this snake-haired monster that could turn a man to stone just by looking at them.
Curses are
And
fun.
yeah, exactly. But then I realized that she was unjustly punished by Athena. Or is it art? No, it was
Yeah,
Athena. It was
it was
Athena.
Athena
it is
because he was
Athena.
jealous of her beauty.
Ironically,
Um,
ironically, the
so
goddess of wisdom.
I thought it was because
so there is, and I just took a classical mythology course last month, and as a practicing pagan, I actually work with Athena. She my boo, she my bee, she my girl. Never fails me,
So she was
regardless.
petty.
Shh, I'm not gonna say that, but Greek mythology always has a little bit of leeway with who's good and who's, not so great. But I did actually end up asking my mythology professor because there's the modern retelling of Medusa where, she was, again, trigger warning, she was raped by Poseidon in the temple of Athena. And Athena is a virgin goddess, so this was like a triple no-no all in one. And so she cursed her to become this hideous creature that could turn people to stone by looking at her. And in the modern retelling, it's been changed to where this was not a curse but a gift where Athena was giving Medusa this protection, that no one would ever harm her again, that she could always protect herself. And I asked
Hmm.
my mythology teacher, I was like, hey, or professor, is this just a modern retelling, or is there any kind of like actual mythological basis for this? And he told me that there is actually mythological basis for this. It was oh, I'm gonna shoot myself. It was the guy who wrote the Oresteia. I can't remember his name right now. I could Google it, but the ancient Greek who wrote the Oresteia, he had a bunch of other plays as well. He did have basis in his stories that Athena's curse to Medusa was not a curse, but it was a gift of protection instead, which makes me feel a lot better.
I mean, I hear a lot of people telling that because, and I'm happy to know that there is some basis on it in ancient text rather than something more modern, because it kind of paints people in a bad light. And now that I'm saying these words out of my mouth, I'm kind of debating whether I should even go into it because it's kind of off topic to the thing. But you and I can talk about this off camera. I'm not going to
It
talk
was
about what I was going to
Ecclesiastes.
say.
Like, yeah, so I was
Okay.
I was waiting to say it because I looked it up.
That's why I mouthed you. I got it. I
Yeah,
got
okay.
but it's Ecclesiastes is his name.
But I want to get on a monster
Yeah.
that I really hate seeing it depicted, even though I know me and Jose has talked about this also before. This
Go
is
for it.
my second favorite mythological creature, and it comes from
Jackalope.
America. No. Well, technically,
Mothman.
Jackalope are pretty cool. Mothman is a cryptid, not a mythological creature. Mothman
Dang
was
it.
not Native
Right.
American. It happened in the 1970s with the Silver Bridge. I know because my grandmother also saw Mothman because he lived in Point Pleasant at the time. What I'm talking about is the Wendigo.
Yes.
Y'all brave for saying that name. Y'all brave. Y'all live up farther north than I do.
So,
Well, do you guys are you guys aware of the original story of
yes.
the Wendigo? Because in the story, the creature isn't even seen.
Mm-hmm. It's a spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And the spirit will possess people and devour their flesh. If somebody has committed cannibalism, that spirit will possess that person, and it will use that person to devour more. And then that mutated into, whenever Europeans got to it, into just, instead of a spirit being possessing a body, it just became, they turn into these creatures. And longer and longer that lore has gone on, the more they basically went, oh, there's also this thing called a skinwalker and this thing called a Wendigo. Let's put them together. They're the same thing. They are completely different things. My wife is native and will fight people over this. The Wendigo is completely separate from the Skinwalker. The Wendigo, like Jose said, was a spirit. It was a spirit that would attack you if you committed cannibalism to possess you and continue on that route of cannibalism. It was
Even the cannibalism thing was
yeah.
not in the original tellings of the story. That is something else that was added onto it
Yeah,
rather early on. But because forgive me, it's been a minute since I've read the original story that depicted it. But there was no mention of the guy who went missing and was possessed.
Yeah, because he was on
a
a river, wasn't he? He was on a river traveling.
Yes. Yeah, and there was no, because he was by himself, so there was
Yeah.
no one for him to eat. So that cannibalism thing is something that was added on later on, even. But like I know that like I'm a big comic book person and I love Marvel, and the Wendigo was from Marvel Comics was really the first exposure I had, and the cannibalism part is there, but they also make it look like a white werewolf, white yeti kind of creature. And it is also a curse that can be passed on, just like a werewolf's bite can pass on that curse. And then Charmed, I love Charmed. The original Charmed, Piper got turned into a Wendigo in the first season. And again, it was very much like the werewolf. They would transform during the full moon. She got infected by being scratched or bitten. I think it was scratched.
It was scratched.
So yeah, so they very much mix the Wendigo with different mythological creatures. So sometimes people like me, I go my entire life reading one version of this creature, only to find out later on that they are not that. They were not originally that. And I'm sorry, but a creature that goes after you, or a spirit that goes after you in the woods, can possess you, can cause you to shrivel up and die. And that's how this blood curdling like scream right before it gets you, but you never actually really see it, as far as I know. That strikes more fear in me than some white furred werewolf that lives in the Canadian wilderness. Yeah.
One of the creepiest things too is like the fact that a lot of people think that the natives got the idea of like the bipedal deer skull antler thing that we ended up finding later when the natives
Mhm.
changed the story. A lot of people speculate that they got that idea because some white-tailed deer and mule deer will sometimes stand up on their hind legs and walk on their hind legs for a certain period of time. It's a certain neurological disease, I believe, is what causes it. But if you ever look it up, it's terrifying, and I could definitely see if in the middle of the night and you see that walking towards you, like I would freak out. Like I totally get where they got
Mhm.
that depiction from, and I agree. Like hearing that scream, the depiction of both the old and the more updated one that the natives made, like that, the idea is terrifying. Like the Donner Party, the Native Americans said the Donner Party basically they all became Wendigos because they ate each other. Like
Are you talking
it's
about wasting deer disease?
yes, chronic wasting disease.
Oh yeah, that's what it's called. That's terrifying because they look like they're turning into zombies
Mhm.
because their skin is effectively rotting off of them. Yeah, no, that's yeah, we're from the South where people eat the woods or they eat the
Well,
deer in the woods,
And then
so
they get chronic
that's something you
wasting,
gotta
all of a
watch
sudden
I'm
out
they should
for.
they're falling over dead. And me and they were both southern,
I'm
so
no longer eating venison thanks to you two.
technically Jose's
Well,
more southern than all of us, technically.
fair, fair. I had a question for
I'm
you
sure.
guys,
Mhm.
and I'll answer it first to give you guys time to think about it because it might be more of a question you have to think about.
Mhm.
What is a mythological creature that you see underrepresented that you wish you could see more of?
Other than werewolves.
Ooh, that's a good
Yeah.
one.
Other than
Um,
werewolves.
other than
We're
werewolves.
putting that down
I'll
now
go.
because all three of us will say werewolves.
I actually won't. I'll go first, just to give you guys time to think about it if you need it. Mine would
Mhm.
be and I'm probably gonna butcher this, but the Lamasu from Mesopotamian mythology, effectively like a sphinx with the head of a man, the body of a lion, the wings of an eagle. And throughout Mesopotamian and then later Persian culture, it was an incredibly wise creature. The eagle wings were supposed to symbolize freedom and power and all those kind of wonderful things. If you look at ancient Mesopotamian art, it's all over the place. It's spelled Lamussa. Oh crap, let me look that up, make sure I spell that right. Yeah, Lamassu. It ended up becoming the concept of the Sphinx as well. So I think that's an incredibly cool creature, and I wish we saw more of them.
Do you want me to go next since you're still looking, Jose?
Please do.
Okay, so for me personally, even though people don't really get my meaning with this, there's a lot of zombie movies. I just think they're not shown correctly because zombies come from Haiti. The idea of zombies uh come from hoodoo from Haiti, and it was not a flesh eating thing. It's a person that is brought back using dark magic to be a servant, and we've gone so left field with it that I feel like zombies not only are incorrect but also misrepresented as to what they originally were. They were not these mindless idiots. They were people who were basically turned into a servant, and they were dead, but their soul was gone, but their body remained. And I think that's a really cool concept, but we never expanded on that. I said the only show that got kind of close is iZombie because I actually really like that show because it showed a depiction of they're not mindless idiots. They actually are still there, but they're not. Now we both awkwardly stare at Jose.
Sorry, there is this creature that I really wanted to talk about, but I can't find his entry in my book,
Do you want to keep
and
looking?
I
Because I
don't
have
want to.
another one.
By all means, please buy me time.
And I have a dog. Um, The another one to me is going to be my sweet girl from Scotland, Nessie. We have never had a movie about Nessie, Loch Ness monster.
Wouldn't that technically be a cryptid though? Like,
my dog is
In the
in my
way
lap.
in the way that it's moved into modern culture, I might agree that it's a cryptid, but it is still very much
It was there before that big photograph and it took
yes.
though.
Yes, it's still very much a local legend
Mhm.
tied to one specific area, and then it just blew up.
Yeah, and I literally believe there is a what is it? It's magical Leopleurodon, Charlie. What's the dinosaur they think that it is?
Oh yeah, a Leopleurodon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they just think that it's
the
just a
plesiosaur.
plesiosaur.
Oh
I
yeah,
think it's a
plesiosaur.
plesiosaur. And I
Yeah, none
actually
of us
because
are
the
paleontologists,
thing
so
about like the locks is they were originally ocean that got landlocked. They got but they were originally ocean. And that lock is big. I've been there. It's a big lock. And I could definitely see something surviving down there because they also goes pretty deep too. Like there's so many like the water scares the shit out of me. I have a phobia of deep water. And there's so many things about the ocean and deep bodies of water that we don't know that scare the living shit out of me. Even though I love Cthulhu, who is in the bottom of the Pacific Ocean in Ryleth. But
I
that's
love
for another podcast.
so my mom, when I was growing up, my mom worked in a library, so I got to read. I had unlimited access to every book that I could possibly dream of that was in that specific public library. But I remember specifically reading a book on, like it was for kids, but it was a book on the Loch Ness Monster, and it was talking about how deep the Loch Ness actually goes. And what it is because it's in this incredibly
Yep.
mountainous areas, the valleys have just been filled with water. And it's I mean it's I'm gonna
It goes below 400 feet.
yeah, like that's insane. Humans can't go that far. That's it's no, but the deep water fear, that's warranted. That's super warranted.
All right, Jose, did you find it?
I did. But now I feel like the other creature that I found while looking for this one was more interesting to me.
I did too,
So
so
I'll
you
do
can do
both.
too. I'm not going to stop you.
So this one I know has, I don't think it originated in Pennsylvania, but I do know that stories of it were told in Pennsylvania and more like northern and Pennsylvania. So it's known as the squonk.
Yep, it originally is from Pennsylvania.
Oh, so, okay, so
I
you are aware of
actually
the squonk.
Yeah, I'm a West
I
Virginian. I'm south of Pennsylvania. Yes, I'm very aware of the squonk.
Yeah.
I am not aware of the squonk whatsoever. Please inform me.
Well, first let me show you a picture because
Best way to describe it
Oh,
is imagine a typical goblin that you would see in like an old traditional art with basically chicken pox, but they're all bloated chicken pox.
yes.
got the bubonic
So,
plague.
Yeah, pretty much.
but I mean, it does have a rather unsettling appearance. Um, definitely don't want to like touch it, I guess. So I'm trying to like read a little bit about it without going too long. Let me see. So it is described as being hideously ugly, with loose skin that sags and bags from its belly, and dotted with warts and strange ulcerous growth. For this reason, it shuns the presence not just of man, but every creature of the woods, and lives a solitary life, feeling sorry for itself, other than bursting into uncontrollable fits of tears.
I mean, I'd cry if I was that ugly too, but
Yeah, but it's just it's sad because it's not a mean creature at all. It's just ugly, and it thinks it's it views itself that way, and it keeps itself away from everybody. Um, and it says here that if captured, it will completely dissolve into a fluid, as one hunter found upon examining his dwelling. So even if it's captured, it finds a way to get away by turning into liquid. And I just thought that that was such a sad creature that my heart went out to it because like sadness. So like I would like this to be, especially because it's something that's told in my home state of Pennsylvania. I would love for more depictions of this. But the one that
I just like see I walk a lonely road. It's just out in the woods walking, just depressed.
I can, I mean, except for the walking in the, although I do love walking in the woods, but I can relate. Uh, and the other one I wanted to talk about is known as a brownie. And no, I'm not talking about the chocolate treat.
Yeah.
Basically, they're like little. I don't want to call them elves because, but like little miniature people. Think kind of like that story about the shoemaker and the elves that help him. The little miniature people to help build. Like they're kind of like that, but they usually picked a family and lived in their home. And they did stuff while the family was like asleep. They would like clean the cupboards and get rid of cobwebs. They were
They were
pretty much
good.
yes, and they were very good creatures. And you could leave them, and according to some stories, not all, but in some stories, you can leave them little treats that they would be accepting of. But any
Mead,
other gift they would
alcohol,
not be okay with.
brandy, sherry.
Well, there was like specific recipes that they would have that you can make, and one of the books that I have actually mentions how to make it. And but if you offer them anything else, like as like repayment for what they were doing, they would be very insulted. And they also have a little bit of a dark side though, because if you
Yeah.
mistreat them in any way, there are stories that say that they become a whole completely different creature, which what this other creature was depicted in the Harry Potter books, but not in the way that it's supposed to be. It was and it was called a Bogart. And so the brownies, if you treat them badly, they become a Bogart and they pretty much torture your household. They do the exact opposite of what they did as a brownie. And if you thought that moving to another house would help you, nope, they will follow you there.
And that's the thing. If you
So
think
I
about
would
poltergeists nowadays, that's basically a poltergeist.
You actually unlocked the memory when you started talking about brownies. I was convinced as a small child that we had a brownie in our house. And I knew there were specific things that you were supposed to leave out for the brownie. And I wanted to give this brownie offerings. I'm like an 8-year-old child in this memory. Like let's just clarify that. But I didn't
This
obviously
brand's
as an
like
8-year-old child,
stupid girl trying to give me Reese cups.
I would give it cosmic brownies, and then I would say, "I'm sorry, I don't know what else to give you. I can't give you alcohol. I don't know how to cook, but I could give you cosmic brownies, and I hope that you like." And I will say those cosmic brownies were always gone. Let me tell you that right now. But yeah, and that was I kept them out of reach of the dog, so it wasn't the dog eating the brownies. But yeah, no, that you just unlocked memory.
My
that first
grandmother,
of all, adorable. Adorable. Little 8-year-old you leaving cosmic brownies for a brownie. That is so freaking cute.
my grandmother actually used to keep out a shot of I think it was sherry, on her kitchen cabinet because of brownies. Because where I am, Scottish and Norwegian and English, and very heavily my family has stuck with traditions. Brownies are a very big tradition in Anglo-Saxon folklore, and
Hmm.
me and that side of the family being Scottish, it very much held on to that root of leaving out brandy for the brownies.
And and I've always loved these creatures, and I felt like we've seen like the Bogart depicted, like I said, in Harry Potter, but rather incorrectly. Um, I haven't. I could be wrong. I think that the Spiderwick, however you pronounce it,
Spiderwick.
they've they depicted both the brownies and the Bogarts, and actually the Spiderwick ones, the little book that they released, which a friend got me, and I have in front of me here. It actually included a little recipe for like this little porridge thing that you would leave out for them, and I actually did make it once just for fun, and I'm pretty sure it was my husband who got rid of most of it and made it look like someone had actually eaten it. I came down and I looked at it and I'm like, oh well, this is gone. Okay, but I pretty much assumed that my husband did it, or did he? Who knows? You guys tell me. But I would love to see them depicted in something other than those Spiderwick or Spiderwick, however you pronounce it, books, movies, and so on.
I'm going to say
Especially the
this,
Bogart.
since we're nearing the end and we need to talk about it. Let's talk about werewolves.
Here we go.
My favorite mythological creature is werewolves. I love werewolves. And I will tell both of you about my favorite werewolf story and as to why I believe werewolves did exist at one point, but I'll let you two go first.
Well, I want to correct something that was said earlier. Um, Werewolves are not my all-time favorite. They are my second favorite, but it's a very, very close second. Merfolk are my favorite. I am a child of the ocean, If I ever play a game that has elemental thing to it, I choose water. But werewolves are a creature that kind of like vampires. The stories have changed as time went on. I think it was what is it, Eastern European where the myth started, if I'm not mistaken.
Actually, the
And
majority of the idea we have comes from Eastern, like Romania and Russia, and also France. Surprisingly, France is a big contributor to werewolf myth.
okay. And I love how the stories have changed from it being something that came naturally, where that they could transform into a wolf form, which was usually like an actual wolf, like not like this humanoid form. Um, but yeah, they went from that to it being like a curse that would be triggered by the full moon. And in some media, it's not just the full moon, but the day before and the day after. And in some, they become like a wolf or a gigantic version of a wolf, like in Twilight, or like a humanoid werewolf human hybrid, which is my preference as far as
Same.
like aesthetic. But most stories depicted them as turning into an actual wolf.
A
Um,
dire wolf in
and
a
there's
sense.
Yes, and in most stories, like even like you go back and you read certain myths, they might not call them lycanthropes or werewolves, but the basis is there. There's I forget I don't know if it was Greek or what, but there was this one guy that being punished by and his village didn't trust him, and he ended up turning into a wolf and killing a whole bunch of them, and that was like really like an ancient story, but obviously they didn't refer to it as lycanthropy or werewolf. But I love the story. I love how it has evolved. And now I feel like it's devolving. Because we haven't had a lot of good representation of werewolves in media. I remember I mentioned the Vampire Diaries earlier, which I am a fan, despite the brooding vampires. But they had introduced werewolves into it, and even the show made fun of werewolves, saying, "Oh, they're basically all extinct. They mostly now exist in really bad horror movies." And they weren't wrong because
Nope.
a lot of horror movies from that depict werewolves are really really bad, and that makes me angry because the potential is there.
In my personal opinion, the three best werewolf movies is Dog Soldiers because it shows a whole family living in Scotland in isolation, and the full moon doesn't make it, so they have to turn during the full moon. They can turn whenever they want to, and
Hmm.
they hunt this whole forest area for that. Second is going to be a movie that made me love werewolves when I was young, which is going to be my brain's now derping. Uh, Ginger Snaps. That movie is so good. Have you seen it?
Never heard of
You
it.
need to watch Ginger Snaps. It's so good. And my third pick is probably going to be uh, an American Werewolf in London.
I knew that was I
Yeah,
knew that was gonna. I mean, I, I don't personally like that one. Like I don't hate it,
the
but I don't love it.
transformation is
But
what I like.
yeah, yes, the transformation was very good. But in your defense, the options are very
They
low.
are. Emma,
My only note here is to add that accrediting the Overly Sarcastic Productions YouTube channel, which is phenomenal. If y'all haven't listened to it, y'all should go. That's a rabbit hole that is worth getting into. But anyway, I did not know until about 2 years ago when Red made this whole video on werewolves. Um, they're actually canonical in the Catholic like religion
yes.
and their theology because in Europe at the time people were genuinely so afraid of werewolves coming after them that the Catholic priests had to debate amongst one another. Well, are we just projecting, like in our dreams, are they manifesting and becoming a wolf and running around, or is it actually a person that's turning into a wolf? So yeah.
Have you two ever heard of the Beast of Gévaudan?
Yes.
Yes, but remind me because it's been years.
So the village of Gévaudan in France, there was people who were living there. Obviously, they were farmers, and this is right before the French Revolution. This wolf, this wolf, would come from the woodline, and it would start attacking women and children, and it would just take them and drag them back to the forest or kill them there. And numerous people died. It got to the point where they had to write the king of France. The king of France saw it, and he sent the army to Gévaudan to find and kill its wolf. The soldiers could not kill it. they shot it repeatedly and it would not die. So the soldiers said, okay, screw this, we're leaving. So the king put a bounty on it, and there's two stories. One is the wolf was never killed. The one is a guy took the ransom, killed the thing, and brought it back to Versailles. But when the revolt happened, it was lost. But there's sure documented proof that this thing lasted, I think, 6 months of just killing and eating people, and it was everybody described it as a wolf, as a very large wolf, and that's a werewolf, literally in folklore. That's why I believe werewolves, that they did exist. I believe that was one.
I mean, it's interesting. It always nice to see, like, to think about. Well, not always, because there's some truly frightening creatures out there. But it's always weird to think about, like, could these creatures have existed in some time, or what real life creature or event influence the creation of these legends and stories. Like, I know even like in Japanese and Chinese and other Asian cultures, there are a lot of very, very interesting creatures that I've had people look and kind of like explain where they could have originated from. Like even stuff like the kitsune, and it's like a magical fox, and I see that depicted in different media in different ways. Like I was a big fan of Pokemon and Digimon. The creatures of like Ninetales and Renamon evolutionary line is based off of it. There's a lot of really cool creatures out there. Werewolves, obviously, being one of the more popular ones. You would think that they would get a little bit more respect in media because they are indeed popular. But yeah, it's been a real pleasure talking to you guys about these creatures. I mean, the passion that Emma has for her merfolk matches my own. I feel like I found someone I can really be open to about my dream of jumping into the ocean and sprouting a tail.
Yeah.
I'll stay on the land. You two can have the ocean all you want. I'm gonna stay up here. I like solid ground underneath my feet.
I feel like if
It
you
won't be
had
solid ground for long.
I feel like if you had like a fin and the ability to breathe underwater, and maybe if your eyes were more adjusted or your body was more adjusted to the pressure, definitely feel like the ocean would not be as terrifying at that point. But I also believe that if I could turn into a mermaid, haha, would I if I could? But if you
Preach.
could, I would not be in that shit after dark, because I've grown up on the ocean or water my entire life, and I've seen how dark it gets. I mean, darkness in general is still
But the
terrifying
thing
to me.
is,
It's
light
totally
already
true.
absorbs and cancels out light
Yeah.
at a certain depth. So just
Yeah.
with the night to itself, it's just.
And a
Here's
lot of
why.
those scary creatures that live in the deep sea do rise up to, higher, elevations when it becomes dark.
Anglerfish are an abomination to God. That's all I have to say.
They're cute though. They're cute in an ugly way.
They're 6 feet fucking big. They're terrifying.
Cute in an ugly way, okay?
Okay, agree to disagree. Agree
Okay.
to disagree.
They
You
have
go-
their own
you go
little
hug-
night lights.
No, I'm sorry. I love the ocean and I love all its creatures, including the anglerfish, but I cannot say that thing is not creepy as fuck. I'm sorry.
Cute.
But
Give me
in an
I mean,
jellyfish.
if
I'll be
Finding
fine.
Nemo has taught us anything.
Uh-huh.
But all right, guys. This was an amazing episode, and guys, stay tuned for the next one where we'll be talking about something else geeky. Would it be a video game? Will it be more myths? Find out.
We don't know, but you'll find out about the same time we will. So, see you
You're
all
in the
later.
future.
Yeah.
You can
Professionals.
just click to the next one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, just click on the next one. It's right there. It's right